Now, last Friday, kids around the world, well, the Western world anyway, emulated Greta Thunberg and ditched school to take to the streets for the 5th annual school strike for climate. School children in Sydney have been so petrified by teachers and the media about the impact of climate change, they genuinely believe that their futures are in peril, that they and their families' lives are in danger because the planet is heating up. Here are just a few of the protesters.
I would rather be at school. My education is so important, and that's why it is urgent that we're here today, because I'm putting my education at risk to tell the government about this.
Well, I'm extremely worried. I know that my future is at risk. I know that we have seen devastating bushfires, devastating droughts, devastating floods across the country, and I know young people across the country and across the world are extremely concerned.
We're here today to fight for our future and tell the federal government that we have had enough with their superficial climate policies. We're telling them that their superficial greenwash climate action is not enough, and we demand no new coal, gas or oil projects.
Joining me now is Alex Epstein, author of Fossil Future and the Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. Alex, these students are supposedly taking a day off to teach the world a lesson, but no matter how much governments give into these sort of extreme climate demands, it's never going to be enough for the climate catastrophists.
It's really scary and sad to see the extent to which these kids have been brainwashed. I mean, it really amounts to psychological torture, because the actual fact is they live in the best world that has ever existed, including human beings are far safer from climate than we've ever been. And a huge part of that is we've had all of this energy from fossil fuels that has allowed more people to have more energy than ever before, including to do things like alleviate drought. You know, drought-related deaths, these students have no idea, but they're down 99% over the last 100 years. So we've actually taken an inhospitable planet and made it a lot better, and yet they think it's so bad. And it's really two errors. One is they've not been told any of the benefits of fossil fuels, and the other is that they've catastrophized the side effects of fossil fuels. So it's as if we developed the polio vaccine, because fossil fuels are really like the poverty vaccine, and everyone thought polio was worse than ever. This is the state of brainwashing that has occurred.
And this collective doomsday group thing is becoming so ingrained in young people, in students. They're parroting nonsense pushed by Extinction Rebellion, and sadly, increasingly shrill segments of the media. This generation is missing the big picture, though, Alex. You talked about how fossil fuels are a cure for poverty, but right now the world's got a real crisis in energy.
Just one more comment on that other thing. You know, one ththing that I found particularly troubling is how confident they seem. They've not just aped the propaganda, but they've aped the pseudo certainty. You know, these kids have no idea that fossil fuels are making the world a livable place. And they seem to be totally clueless that there's a global energy crisis, to your point, where because we've artificially restricted the supply of fossil fuels just to attempt to move a little bit toward their elimination, we've caused this terrible crisis where people are afraid of cold. And in a sense, they should be, because far more people die of cold than of heat. But the level of ignorance plus confidence, that has been bred into students by just total brainwashing. And it's really cult-type behavior.
That is a perfect description, because it's that doomsdayer cult behaviour, and it's that ignorance and yet absolute arrogance about what's going to happen and why. And, you know, they've all got their smartphones, though. They've all got lifestyles that are supported by fossil fuels and by mining, but they want an end to it all today. In the UK, and
they should take a day off using fossil fuels. That would be educational.
That would actually earn them some respect, because whatever you think of their arguments and their doomsday predictions, if they actually lived what they preached, you could show some respect for that. But of course they don't. And we're seeing the impact of these net zero policies. The UK has gone down that road strongly. and their bills continue to skyrocket, sending millions into energy poverty. They've got energy price caps there now, but household energy bills are still expected to rise from £2,100 to £3,000 a year in April. Why are consumers still facing these soaring prices, Alex, despite efforts to clamp them with price caps?
Well, I mean, the price cap is just a denial of reality. They're just trying to basically push the bill toward later or to hide it. It's much in the US, we just subsidize solar and wind a huge amount. So we pay for it through our tax bills, and you don't see it on your electricity bill entirely. You see it a lot on your taxes, but it doesn't make any difference. I mean, what happens is every price is set by supply and demand. So when you artificially restrict the supply of fossil fuel by opposing investment under the banner of ESG, when you oppose production, like you ban fracking, you oppose transport, like in the US, we got rid of the Keystone XL pipeline after over 10 years. When you oppose all of these things, you reduce the supply, and they pretended the demand would go away because we had solar and wind, but those proved unreliable, and they only produce electricity, or they produce unreliable electricity. So this is just a scam that you were going to be able to get away with restricting the supply of fossil fuels. So what happened is demand goes up and supply goes down, and the wealthier parts of the world are outbidding the poorer parts. So even at very high prices, the UK can still afford it, but they're just trying to conceal this by clamping down on prices. But price controls just create shortages. And the basic fact is you've made fossil fuels far more expensive unnecessarily through your anti-fossil fuel policies.
Absolutely. And there's another layer to the renewables boom, particularly when it comes to things like electric vehicles. And that's the components of the batteries. We know with cobalt, the miners can face some horrendous conditions as they provide the materials for these EV batteries. Why isn't there not sufficient attention on this? Because you would think all the people who supposedly care about the environment also care about the human rights of workers and their working conditions. And when you see the footage from those mines, those artisanal mines, sometimes they call them, it is just shocking. And you see little children working there, 4 or 5 years old.
One point I make in my book, Fossil Future, is I don't think that people care about, quote, the environment in a human sense, in the sense of they want the world to be a better place for human beings to live. Because if you cared about that, you'd be for fossil fuels, for nuclear, for hydro, for mining. And the modern green movement is against all of those. So I believe that the claimed support for solar and wind and EVs is just a rationalization for their hostility toward all industry. And so part of that is they're not particularly concerned about the human consequences of pursuing their goals. And so when they just try to get rid of the internal combustion engine and they reassure us, oh, EVs will do it, they haven't thought that through at all. They haven't thought through what's going to happen when you have more electricity demand and less electricity supply. And they certainly haven't thought through the whole supply chain, including what kind of slave labor or mistreated labor is involved. So it's good that it's getting some attention, but it really shows how little thought is exerted when it comes to energy. Just people have these crazy ideas about, oh, EVs can replace everything immediately, solar and wind can do it. It's not a serious thought. It's just an excuse for their anti-fossil fuel, anti-industry agenda, just trying to reassure us, oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. And we have an energy crisis that's warning us, no, everything will not be fine.
Well, yeah, you can still have your car, it'll just be an EV, but of course, the end goal is not every household will have a car because, as you've said before, these are anti-human policies. And finally, talking about anti-human, we're seeing plastic straws progressively outlawed. In Victoria now, the state I'm in, they have now banned single-use straws, so you have to use metal or worse, paper. But why, again, when we care about things like pollution in the oceans, and this is an issue I care deeply about, why is there no focus on where this pollution is actually coming from? The Asian countries that are dumping rubbish directly in waterways, why are we banning straws in Melbourne when that's not what's causing the plastic pollution in our oceans?
I think what's going on is this movement, this green movement, likes to use guilt to, to cow us and to control us. And like plastic straws really just shows how pitiful and weak we have become. And this whole war against single-use plastics, like single-use plastics, one of the greatest inventions of modern times, right? Take a hospital. Like, how can a hospital function without single-use plastics? And even, in a restaurant, it's great to have these things. They're incredibly cheap. You can dispose of them effectively. You can burn plastic, by the way, and generate energy. It's an amazing thing. And yet they subject us to these absolute pieces of junk paper straws that just disintegrate. And it makes no sense. And it's just suffering. So it's getting us guilty and getting us to accept suffering and make ourselves miserable. And it's like a tiny little trial balloon for, well, if you can get us to have this crappy straw, well, then you can also get us to have a crappy life. And you see they've gone from green energy will make us rich to green energy, well, okay, we have to eat bugs now. And soon it's going to be, well, we all can't live.
In Australia, they're still continuing with the green energy will make you rich or reduce your bills lie. So we're still at that stage. We're not at the bug eating stage, but it's coming. It's coming. Alex Epstein, thank you so much for your time today.